if you have a baby, here's what happens. They're like, ah! And you're like, what do you want? And they're like, ah! And you're like, I guess I'll just sing you a song. And then you're like, I forgot every song. And then you're like, here's an Irish drinking song I learned in college. Here's a mountain goat song. It's about heroin and suicide. He doesn't know. So just sing whatever's down in there. So that's how I found out that this is an okay lullaby. Mostly it's a little misleading, but there's one very sweet line. When you sing it to your fairly new human that lives in your house now.
Okay.
I threw a wish in the well. Don't ask me, I'll never tell. I looked at you as it fell, but now you're in my way. I tricked myself for a wish, pennies and dimes for a kiss. I wasn't looking for this, but now you're in my way. Your hair was holding, ripped jeans, skin was showing. Hot night, wind was blowing. Where you think you're going, baby? Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe. And all the other boys, they try to chase me, but here's my number, so call me maybe. Took your time with the call, I took no time with the fall. You gave me nothing at all, but still you're in my way. I beg and borrow and scheme, half foresight when it's real. I didn't know I would feel it, but it's in my way. Your hair is holding, ripped jeans, skin was showing. Hot night, wind was blowing. Where you think you're going, baby? Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe. It's hard to look right at you, baby, but here's my number, so call me maybe. Before you came into my life, I missed you so bad. I missed you so bad. I missed you so, so bad. Before you came into my life, I missed you so bad. And you should know that I missed you so, so bad. It's hard to look right at you, baby, but here's my number, so call me maybe. And all the other boys, they try to chase me, but here's my number, so call me maybe. Thank you. This is what it's like when I pretend to be Freddie Mercury. How's it going, Denver? I have a cold. It's real. I didn't know I would feel it, but it's in my way.
You did good, though.
Thanks. I'm coming over to my podium. That's a surprise. So, what's going on? I was attempting this evening to achieve a goal. Wait for it. The thing I wanted to do, and mostly failed at, was to create a microcosm of the social internet in a physical space. Let me explain. At the beginning, we had some music, much of which was popularized by, or even created by, the social internet. We also had some times where, my nose is running, that's embarrassing. We also had some viral videos, that was good. We also had blindfolded people forced to hold hands, hitting each other with baseball bats for being wrong about something that might not matter, which is basically Twitter. but also the conversation, I wanted it to be two-way for this show. I wanted to have a thing where it was like, I was doing this, you were doing this, and I just got to see the audience. I got to see you guys go woo, at least. Come up on stage, have a good time with us some, and in that way, like, this evening would be different from all the other shows that we're doing, which is definitely true. But there's a really big way in which this will never be like the internet, which is that I can see you, and you can see me, and you can see each other, and we are aware that we are all sitting together in a room kind of doing the same thing for an hour, which, when does that ever happen? I don't know. It's like the only time in my life when I get to do one thing for an hour and a half straight is these shows. But like, regardless, like, we had this experience together and we were aware of each other physically. A friend of mine, George Watsky, once told me a really obvious thing. What? I really like George. Thank you. So George once said to me that every gathering like this is the only gathering that this group of people will ever have. We could work together forever, and we won't, to try and get the same group of people together, and we would fail because everybody would have something that they had to do that day. And so this is like the only gathering that we get as a group of people, and that was really poignant for me. But I also realized recently that this is also true of Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. Those are big rooms with unique groups of people, finite numbers, that have gathered together in a place, and they make jokes, and they argue, and they create culture, and they change things. And somehow, though, despite the fact that it is just a room full of people, I'm going to mostly focus on me, do not see that as, I see it like simultaneously in two different mutually contradictory ways. I see it as like an infinite number of people, like that, like every person in the world is here, and also others, and I don't like imagine it as a finite number, but I also imagine it as zero people. That like somehow every thought on these platforms, every creation on these platforms are somehow divorced from the people who created from them. And in that moment of cognitive immersion, when I look at a tweet, I don't see the person who made and composed the tweet. I don't see the physical space they were in on the bus, or maybe not paying enough attention to their family at the dinner table, or on the toilet. It's probably okay. Making that tweet, I just see that thought as its own unit of culture, as separated from a human being. And I started to wonder recently if that was like a bug, or if it was a feature. Like, is that a problem with the platform, or is that the whole reason why it works? Because I think that it's the whole reason why it works, that we can separate these units of culture from the people who create them. And I think that it's like, that's like the thing that they're selling us. And because I think that if we imagined the room as a room, we would all be orders of magnitude more careful with each other. Sounds like I'm about to cry, but I'm not. I don't think. And I think that part of the reason why these platforms work is that, you know, for a lot of the history of the internet, we've been working to lower the barriers of creation, the barriers of distribution. We give more people tools to create things, to interact, to participate in culture, and to reach more people. And that's great. I've always been a huge advocate for that. But now I've started to think that maybe these platforms are also trying to lower our cognitive barriers to creation. They want us to make stuff even when maybe if we thought about for a second, maybe we wouldn't. Because they want as much stuff on the platform as possible, and they don't mind if it's controversial, because that increases the number of people who are engaging with the platform. And they want it so that that scroll is infinite and you never run out of content to look at, because that moment when you run out is the moment when you stop. And so I think part of that is like not just lowering the technological or the financial barriers to creation, but lowering your own cognitive barriers to creation. Maybe when trying to decrease the amount of space between having a thought and tweeting that thought, which, for me anyway, is a vanishingly small space. In fact, sometimes I feel like I haven't really had a thought until it's tweeted. It's a problem. So I wrote this book because I had some things that I was afraid of, some things that I felt like I knew, and some things that I really wanted to share that I didn't feel like I could share without April's help. For the first 10 years of me being on the internet, I believed pretty unquestioningly in its power to do good and didn't think a lot about whether it had powers to do bad. And when people brought up their concerns about the internet to me, I even got pretty defensive about that. I as if my identity was being attacked. We'll talk about that soon. When I started to internalize those concerns and think like maybe these people have a point, maybe there are problems with the internet, maybe it isn't all good, like that hit me in the self-worth, because I had tied a lot of my identity to the social internet and talked a lot about the good that it could and would do. I brought people into it, I built communities there, I defended it, I promoted it to people, and if it was a bad, then I had spent a lot of my life kind of doing a bad and like doing it to other people too. And that was a really scary thought that I didn't want to look directly at. Simultaneously, I watched as a lot of my friends started to be negatively impacted by notoriety and fame. People burned out, or they got depressed, or they got isolated. They isolated themselves. They got suspicious of other people because they couldn't trust whether someone liked them or just wanted to use them for something. They sometimes used their power in bad ways. And I took a look at my own life, which had its share of 80-hour work weeks, and I started to wonder if maybe the internet was like bad for culture and bad for people and bad for me as an individual person. This is the kind of overreaction that we are sometimes prone to. Like, I'm all the way over here, and then it's like, pendulum. Like my reaction to the internet might not be all good was, oh my God, the internet is all bad. I don't think that's where we're at. But I think it took like a book's worth of I can't stand on my own podium. I need you. Let's just work together. I need like a book's worth of time to process this stuff. And so this book was very useful to me in that regard, and whether or not anyone else likes it, I have gotten a great deal from it already, which I didn't really expect to be part of the process of writing a book, but maybe I should have. And I think that I still need time to continue processing this stuff, which is a good news if you are interested in a sequel to the book. I think that we have a big problem in our culture, and I think that problem is the internet, and I think that it is also not the internet. We have a tool that we don't 100% know how to use. This is not a unique moment, though. Like the invention of the printing press and the subsequent revolution in communication that it caused contributed to multiple wars. Martin Luther didn't nail his complaints to one church door. He had them printed and distributed across Europe, sometimes illicitly and illegally, and those words fundamentally shifted human history. Gutenberg did not predict that that was going to be a thing. People back then didn't have an idea about communications revolutions and the impact that they would have on culture because there hadn't been a communication revolution since the invention of the written word. And it took a very long time to go from the invention of the printing press to the invention of journalistic ethics. That was hundreds of years. And the idea that we are even at the end of figuring out how to properly use television, to me, is kind of an out there idea. Like, I still think we're trying to figure that out, and I still think that we're maybe doing a bad job of it, and that we could do a much better job of it. And certainly now with the internet, we are in a world where we have a technology that we don't have all the correct norms for. And that's a dangerous moment. And success in that moment, I think, is contingent upon people understanding that the internet isn't something that's happening to us, it's something that we're doing. The internet is, without people, just a bunch of hard drives sitting in a warehouse somewhere. So I think this work has to be done person to person and community to community, but it begins by realizing that the internet is a place that we inhabit, and thus we are its citizens, in the same way that this city and this state and this country is nothing but people. The internet is nothing but people, and so we have to be a citizen of that space. And for me, a good step in that process has been being more of a citizen of my physical spaces, to take time to go out, to be in the places where I live, to see my neighbors, to communicate with people in the real world, to understand the problems that my community faces, to engage in local politics, state politics, national politics, to vote in every election I get the chance to vote in. And then I can apply that civic perspective to the non-physical spaces that I inhabit. I think that we can trick ourselves into thinking that this is like, that the internet is old and done now. Like, we've done it, we're here, it's happened, and we have to live in the world as it exists. But we are still at the very, very beginning of this process, and who decides what it's going to be is ultimately us, and we have a lot of power in that decision-making process if we choose to exercise it. I don't know that we're always going to know when we're doing it, but I think a good first step is just being aware of it and thinking about it, and so I really want to appreciate all of you right now for spending this time, in this particular moment, thinking about it with me. So basically, in closing, the internet is good, it is also bad, and while this book dives into some of the bad parts, it's also a book about how amazing and unreal this moment in human history is, and how lucky we are all to be in it, as opposed to a lot of other moments in human history. So, I wanted to make a rather silly evening to celebrate that with you, and I had a really good time doing it. And that's, yeah, so the internet is good and also bad, and as far as I can tell, you are all very, very good. So thank you for coming and hanging with us. That's nice. All right, sit down and I'll sing you a song. Sometimes it's hard, and it's been maybe not for everybody, hasn't been a great couple weeks. So I really appreciate people coming out and thinking hard and thinking big, and also finding joy in these times when sometimes joy is hard to find. So I hope that this is part of that, and also let's work to do good in the world. But I'm going to end with a song that is probably, let's just say, the most mashed up song ever at this point. And I'm a big fan. And I think I can sing it in its original key. We'll find out. Oh, I can't. Okay, well, it's gonna be weird. Somebody once.
Yeah! All right!
The world is gonna roll me. I need the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kind of dumb with her finger and her thumb in the shape of an L on her forehead. Well, the years start coming and they don't stop coming. Back to the rules and I hit the ground running. Didn't make sense not to live for fun. Your brain gets smart but your head gets dumb. So much to do, so much to see. So what's wrong with taking the back streets? You never know if you don't go. You never shine if you don't glow. Oh, hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. And all that glitters is gold. Only shooting stars break the mold. I'm having a really hard time singing. Because my voice sucks, but I'm gonna try and change the key. Well, it's a come on. I know the words. I'm trying to think of the right key to sing it in. Cold place. I'm gonna sing it. That's not better. Okay. Well, it's a cold place, and they say it's cold. You bottle up now, wait till you get older. The medium and big to differ, judging by the hole in the satellite picture. The SB state is getting pretty thin. The water's getting warm, so you might as well swim. The world's on fire, how about yours? That's the way I like it, and I'll never get bored. Oh, hey now, you're a rock star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid, and all that glitters is gold. Only shooting stars break the mold. Somebody once asked, could I spare some change for gas? I need to get myself away from this place. And I said, yeah, what a concept. I could use a little fuel myself, and we could all use a little change. The ideas start coming and they don't stop coming. Back to the rules that make the ground running. Didn't make sense not to live for fun. Your brain gets smart, but your head gets dumb. So much to do, so much to see. So what's wrong with taking the back streets? You never know if you don't go. You never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. And all that glitters is gold. Only shooting stars break the mold. Thanks, everybody. Be safe. Goodbye.